Hello, everybody, and welcome to Where's the Line, where we explore the gray areas of life. I am so excited to be surrounded by some lovely people, my co-host Jane, and we're coming to you live from Chicago today. So this is our first ever in-person recording.
Yay!
So excited. We'll be shortly introducing our guests. But Jane, how are you?
I'm not gonna lie, I am a little bit stressed at the moment because I am doing a kitchen renovation, and at the time of this recording, it is close to holiday time. So there's a lot of family scheduling, coordination, and that is all happening around this kitchen renovation. So it's very stressful, and I'm now telling people kitchen renovation, it's not for the faint of heart. It is not as exciting as HGTV makes it seem. But it's looking beautiful, so I'm overall very happy with the progress. Sabrina, how are you?
Yeah, no, you really, the stories you tell about this whole process is making me rethink my own future. But no, it's very impressive. I can't wait to see the result. I'm doing great. I'm so happy to be in Chicago. It's been a lovely weekend. I saw many of my favorite people, and I also saw the one, the only Alex Cooper last night. I mean, talking about podcast heroes or idols. Yes. I have no words. And she was touring. Mm-hmm. She's on this bachelorette tour, and she happened to be in Chicago, and I looked up her after party spot, and I pushed myself through the crowds and through the daddy gang. And yeah, Alex, if you're listening, big fans over here. You were definitely an inspiration for us. So so that's been the highlight of the weekend.
It looked like so much fun. Honestly, a little jealous, but I'm glad you had a good time. I'm excited. Do you want to introduce our guest today?
Yes, I have. I'm so excited. We have the absolute pleasure to have with us our dear friend and friend of the show, Catherine Moore-Swiora, with us. Kat is someone I've always admired. I think we've been friends now since 2015, I want to say.
Yeah.
So we were actually coworkers, right? Yeah, we met. I will never forget our San Francisco onboarding experience. But yeah, someone I've always admired, and you're just one of the kindest souls. And I'm just so grateful for you to be here today to share a very personal journey with us. Tell us a little bit more about you, Kat, before we dive in.
Yes, well, I'm so excited and honored to be on the podcast, and it's so fun to be with you both in person as well, to be recording this. So I love it. So yeah, as Sabrina mentioned, Catherine Moore-Swiora, also known as Kat. I am based in Chicago, as we mentioned earlier. I grew up in the Midwest, so I'm a Michigan gal, big fan of the state of Michigan. Grew up between Ann Arbor and Detroit, as you both know, and I moved to Chicago for college to go to DePaul University, and just sort of fell in love with the city, stayed ever since, and had a couple different stints in marketing, market research, but ultimately how I met both of these amazing ladies here was through working at LinkedIn. So I'm still there today. I'm managing a team of sales engineers across the globe, which is such a fun experience. And let's see, I live here with my husband, Dan, our dog, Theo, who I'll apologize in advance if you hear some barking or excitement in the background. He's running around the house at the moment. But that's a little bit about me. And I think we'll dive into some more details shortly on the topic, but honored to be covering a more sensitive topic today in terms of mental health.
Yes.
This is, to your point, a very personal journey for you. It's something you've been kind of going through for the last couple months. And so thank you for sharing this very personal journey with us. For folks who are listening, if this is the first time that you are hearing about an outpatient program, let me just share a little bit of the definition first with you before we get into Kat's experience. So an IOP, or sometimes they're referred to as IOT, they're essentially intensive outpatient treatments or intensive outpatient programs. They are a structured, non-residential psychological treatment program which addresses mental health disorders and substance abuse, substance use disorders that do not require detoxification through a combination of group-based psychotherapy, individual psychotherapy, family counseling, education groups, and a variety of different strategies that encourages motivation and engagement in treatment. These IOPs, and we'll continue to reference them as IOPs, operate on a small scale and does not require the intensive residential or even partial day services typically offered by a larger, more comprehensive treatment facilities. So there's a variety of different types of programs out there, but Kat, maybe before we even get into your experience, can you walk us back and just talk a little bit more about your journey of how you even got to this point of making that decision to participate in an IOP? Was there a last straw moment that you had that really kind of pushed you to choose this as your program?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for setting the scene, Jane, and I'm realizing that definition sounds a lot scarier and more intense than how I think through it. But so to set the context, I did an outpatient program for almost 3 months focused on anxiety and depression. So these programs, and the one I went to in Chicago was incredible, depending on your needs. And I'll preface as well, I'm not a medical healthcare professional, as you've heard. I'm a sales leader at LinkedIn. So take this with just a grain of salt, and this is just my experience that I'm sharing, not any specific advice. But the program itself had a lot of different options in terms of being able to treat, like Jane mentioned, substance use issues or obsessive compulsive disorder specialties. There was a trauma program. There's just, depending on the needs of the person, there's several different programs. And for me, they did an intake given my referral from my doctor around the anxiety and depression piece to fully understand, okay, what I need is actually the mood program. So to back up of how I got there a little bit, I would say over the past year and a half, I first of all never knew that what I was experiencing was actually anxiety and depression, which is wild to me now. So a big turning point for me of even going to this program was after several conversations with my doctor and therapist, who I had been doing therapy for a few years. I think I know a lot of people who, whether it was the pandemic or just other challenges in the world, there's so much going on. Therapy, I think, has luckily become more and more commonplace. So I had that, consistent touch point in my life, but I never really understood that what I was navigating was an actual anxiety and depression challenge. And I think it really took its breaking point for me over the past year to even understand, oh, this isn't just feeling extra stressed or burnt out or just having a bad day or a bad week. These are some serious challenges I'm having that I'm struggling to get out of on my own. I need some additional support beyond what I'm getting. So I think the breaking point for me was coming back from a trip in March, which sounds, opposite of maybe what you would think. I was hoping to come back from this trip that my husband and I had planned for months and months to go visit a dear friend of ours who had moved to Australia for work. And we had this big trip planned to go travel Australia, see Thailand and Singapore, things that I feel so privileged to even be able to take part in. And I think I can go into some more background before that, but I got back from this trip. I'd been talking to my doctor about pursuing, anxiety and depression medications, but I didn't want to start it until I was back in the U.S. and could have the full support in case I experienced bad symptoms. And I'm glad I waited, because the first antidepressant I got on did not sit well with my body. So I think it was a mixture of, having the jet lag from the trip, getting reacclimated to a new medication. We can go into this later if it's helpful, but I had been going through a lot of fertility treatments as well for the previous year and a half. So I think all the extra hormones from IVF, which could be another whole episode probably, if anyone's interested to learn about that. I think all these things sort of compounded into these feelings that I was feeling really intensely for about a year. And I think it all just came to a head following this trip and new medication. And I think the concern of my husband and my parents and my family was really what like pushed me to that step of like, okay, I need support beyond what I'm able to give myself right now, or beyond what's available to me in an hour therapy session. So long-winded way of saying there's a lot of kind of build up to this point. But when I had all of these perspectives, not only my doctor and therapist, but again, my husband, parents, sister, you know, even some friends noticed like something is off with you, like you just don't seem yourself. It was finally a wake-up call for me to say like something's got to change or else this is going to keep getting worse. And so decided to take the referral of my doctor to find this great program called Compass here in the city of Chicago. And honestly, it was pretty I would say reluctant to want to start the program, just because I think, you know, there's a lot of, you know, guilt that I had that came with it in terms of, do I do this? Do I not? How could I like take this much time away from work and my regular life? Like, what will people think? There's just all these questions that kind of flow through your head. But ultimately, like, I realized, okay, this is my breaking point. If I don't do something now, it's only going to get worse. So ultimately, I just had to prioritize my health and getting my brain back to a good place. And I am so relieved that I did. So
Thank you for sharing that. I feel like it was even a journey to get to that decision. Like it took time for you to kind of, you mentioned talking to your partner, talking to family, talking to friends, and different people kind of nudged you towards that decision. Can you help us understand, like, how did you even learn about this? Because I feel like I didn't really know about this. I feel like, to your point, therapy has become a lot more common and it's a lot more accepted in society now. But I feel like intensive outpatient program, one, sounds really intense, but two, like a lot of people don't even know that that's an option unless it gets to a certain point. So how did you like determine between all the different options, and who even told you about this, and like how did you kind of learn about this?
Yeah, so I will say how I initially found out about it. I think before I really hit that breaking point, my primary care doctor had shared outpatient in a list of resources in addition to some extra therapists that had various specialties in anxiety, depression, and even some of the fertility stuff. At the time, and again, I think this is why I almost needed to hit that breaking point to say, like, yes, I need to take this time away, is I saw the resource and I just kind of told myself, like, it's not that bad. I don't think I need one of these intensive programs. I'm not really sure what this is. But, you know, as months and months went on and I started to feel more physical manifestations of my anxiety and depression. So part of that, I think, was tied in with just not reacting well to that first medication, but I started to experience like more frequent panic attacks. I was super restless. Like I couldn't fall asleep or stay asleep very easily. So all of a sudden, all my functioning was starting to break down too. So I struggled to focus. I lost interest in many things that I honestly, I look back at the time and I really didn't have interest in many things at all. Like I just wanted to kind of like hide and isolate and be away from people, which is not traditionally how I would engage. I typically get a lot of energy from being around people. So I think all these things just became more apparent to my doctor as well as my family. And so she gave me this survey that they use. I'm forgetting like the technical names of these, but in essence, it checks for the severity of your anxiety as well as your depression. So 2 different surveys. And when I took the most recent results, she, her credit, she's a primary care doctor. She doesn't specialize in mental health. Mm-hmm. So at that point, she's like, you know what? I'm realizing your scores are so severe. Like they're really getting worse. And I want to get you the support that you need. So she actually recommended that I go get checked out at the hospital just to make sure like everything from a psych perspective was good. Mm-hmm. And even that in that moment, even though I felt so horrible and I felt so out of it, I was like, I don't know if I need, like, I don't know. I was still in denial. I was like, I think I'm fine. I don't think I need to do that. But at this point, my husband was with me. My dad was visiting in town, just like give him and I some extra support. And they're like, why don't we just do it? Like, you're already at this, we can talk about this too, but at this point I'd already gone on a leave of absence from work to just figure out what was going on. So we go to the hospital, wait so long because obviously there's a lot of more severe things going on in an ER than like getting a checkup when it comes to this like psych eval. And so I was pretty quickly let go once they did an eval with me because it was clear I had no intention of like, hurting myself or anyone else. And they're like, typically, if you were really extreme, we would keep you overnight and monitor you and all of this stuff. And like, that's not the level of intensity that you need. So that was a relief for me that I was at least able to, go home. And they said, they validated, like, definitely you're experiencing some really severe anxiety and depression. We would recommend at least exploring these outpatient programs. And that was kind of like the third or fourth recommendation I got for this between primary care, therapist, hospital, getting checked out with that. So I'm like, okay, like, I think I need to actually take action with this time that I'm taking away from work. And so very quickly scheduled an intake meeting and then signed up like as soon as possible. So it was basically in this program the next week. So I think it took 3 or 4 people telling me, like, I recommend this for you to actually say, okay, maybe there's something to this. So ultimately, that was kind of like the final validation I needed of like, okay, I need to do this and I need to take this time. Hopefully it works, but if it doesn't, at least I've given it a shot type of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, honestly, they're really inspiring. And I'm also glad that they offer this type of treatment because there's got to be something in the middle between not just therapy, right? Like we're over therapy. Therapy's not helping, but also you don't need to be hospitalized. So like this in between. So earlier we just heard this mouthful of a Wikipedia definition of IOP. But now that you've observed it and you've gone through it and experienced it, like what if you could give like a summary of the experience?
Yeah.
That would be helpful.
Absolutely. I think, admittedly, when I first heard about outpatient, just even hearing that word, I thought like, am I going to be, locked up in a padded room type situation? Like what is this? And then taking a tour of the facility and hearing more about the program, the clinicians there had shared with me, like, a lot of people that go through the mood program are other professionals like yourself who have hit a wall and need some additional support to get through some mental health challenges. And so I still was like a little skeptical at the beginning. But the way I would summarize it now looking back is I call it like therapy boot camp. So I was in there like 5 days a week, every day. They start you off with a full day program, so mornings and afternoons. And the afternoon piece that I think I got the most out of was art therapy sessions, which was a lot more effective than I thought it would be. It helped me a lot, and they actually kept that as part of my treatment plan, even after I dropped down to just a shorter half day. But in essence, I came away from it feeling like, number one, I think I want to be a therapist one day because we learned so much about different coping skills and research behind mental health. We learned things like cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavior therapy, the power of mindfulness in helping you kind of observe your thoughts without judgment. I just honestly, a lot of it was classroom style of learning about all these skills, group discussions, and then what they called process groups. So I think those were a couple hours each week, and those would be what I would sum up as what you might see in like a movie or TV show, where you have people kind of sitting around in a circle and sharing their challenges and their wins. Like that's actually sort of what it was, is us sitting around in a circle and doing that. So I would say a mix of like classroom style learning, discussions, processing our emotions, and they mixed you up with different people every day. So it was nice to get kind of different perspectives. But it was just eye-opening to me of like hearing other people's experience and thinking, oh, I always thought that was something I just thought in my head, or an insecurity only I ever thought about, or something that other people don't really think through. But hearing other people in similar situations just talk through their different symptoms was super, super eye-opening. So I think those are a few pieces I would use to describe it. In addition, there was a lot of one-on-one resourcing through the program as well. So beyond all the group therapy, they gave you a individual talk therapist. So I'd meet with her once a week to check in. They assigned you to a psychiatrist as well. So think about a doctor who was able to give prescriptions. So finding like the right antidepressant for me was a big value of that relationship. And then they also had family therapy. So you had the option to opt into this everything was opt-in, by the way. You're driving to this program every week. It's not like you're left in the building every day or something. So it's completely voluntary, but you could choose people or a variety of people in your life that you would find valuable to have a therapist walk through the best way to support, in this case, me through this time. So I did a lot of these with my husband, and it gave us a third party to help him understand what I was learning, check in on improvements he was noticing or any challenges, and just gave us a really nice space to do that. So I would say like the individual kind of care team and resourcing that they provided was super helpful, in addition to all the group therapy, boot camp stuff.
Yeah. It's so interesting. I feel like, I mean, this is really the purpose of this episode, is to demystify, right? Because to you guys' point, when we looked up the definition, we were overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And it seemed really intense, right? Because they talk about all these different disorders that they're addressing, and they do actually do that. But I think the way you position it, and honestly, now that we're like learning more about the tactics and the like tips and tricks that you're learning, or even the topics that you're learning, these are things that like we all can benefit from, whether or not we need a program like this, right? And even the things with, like you mentioned, you had your partner go with you, or just have family go with you, and like those are things that are valuable whether or not you're in a program. Like I could also benefit from learning that to support my partner, and my partner vice versa, right? So I think these are things that I think are so helpful to share with our audience, because people are scared. And you even mentioned when you initially like heard about this program, and it took multiple people to push you, because it is very scary and daunting to be in a program like this. So really appreciate you sharing with that. Can you help us understand, like now that you've gone through this program, what were things that aligned to what you expected, right? So you mentioned, for example, like we've all seen TV shows where people are sitting in a circle. So you kind of expected that when you went. So what are things that aligned to what you expected? And what were things that like completely shocked you? Like, for example, you mentioned the art therapy. What are things like that that really helped you?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest surprises for me was honestly the community of people that were in there with me. I think admittedly at the beginning, when I felt just like a shell of myself, honestly, I was just like, get me in, get me out. I just want to like be fixed, teach me all these skills, and I'm on my way. And then slowly over time, as I started to feel better a couple weeks in, I was like, you know what? These people are all going through the same or similar kind of things. And like, I really think it would benefit me to make a better effort to get to know people. So whether it was just like, you know, making sure I went to the kitchen area during breaks or like eating lunch with people, I think that was one of the biggest positives to come out of it for me is like, I still have people that I keep in touch with after the program that just know exactly what it is that we all went through together. There's no judgment, and we can kind of share our ups and downs. So I think that was a really nice takeaway for me that I did not expect to meet like friends and community coming out of this. So that was one. I think, you know, you mentioned the art therapy too. I think I went in kind of skeptical around if that would work for me. And then I remember there was a prompt about grief, and the entire classroom, including myself, were just like silently sobbing to ourselves in a chair while we were drawing. I was like, oh wow, this works. I am a skeptic for no reason. So I think like I mentioned, my talk therapist, she fortunately was an art therapist as well. So she ended up in our one-on-one sessions, incorporating that, which was really nice. Like I just sort of got to get out of my own head, worked on whatever sort of design or doodle or prompt that she had me go through, and it just made it a lot easier to kind of get things out and process them. So art therapy was great. And then, I mean, last but not least, I would say I got so much out of the sit in a circle process groups, so much more than I ever anticipated. And I think, again, similar to my hesitancy of like making friends and reaching out to people in the first couple of weeks, because I was just sort of in this state of shock, honestly. Like even just like getting out of bed and going to the program felt like a big feat at the time. And so we'd get in these process sessions, and it took me a while to actually feel comfortable enough to start like contributing to those, and or like I learned a lot about kind of my people pleasing tendencies and how that's contributed a lot to my anxiety. I remember thinking like, oh, well, I don't know if I want to share this or that because I don't know if it's going to be relevant to other people, or I don't know if it's going to add value. So I was still very much in this like work mentality of like, I need to add value to other people if I'm going to chime in with something. And it was like a big wake up call of like, the point of it is not to add value to other people. The point of it is for you to share. And naturally, other people are going to be able to either support you and give you validation or chime in with their experience. It's therapy. It's not like a work presentation that you need to add value to. So it took me a little while to rip the Band-Aid off. But once I did, I got so much value out of every single session from there out of like, there was nothing I shared in there that I didn't have at least multiple people say that resonated with them. So I think those are a few takeaways that I was really pleasantly surprised with.
Yeah. Can you expand a little bit? Because this was something that when we initially talked about your program really shocked me, is the group that you're with. Like you talked a lot about community, but tell us a little bit more about like the particular community that you were with. Are they all people who have similar background as you? Or, you know, a lot of times I think we think about like crazy people go to the, like, no, it's actually stellar, incredible people that could very much be in this program. What's your experience, and was that shocking for you?
Yeah, it was really interesting. I would say met a mix of a whole bunch of backgrounds and professions. So I talked to people who were in engineering roles, sales roles, entrepreneurs, teachers, honestly, just any and all kind of profession you would have thought. Like it was a adult specific group, so everyone was I think 18 plus or even 21 plus in this group, because they had like a young adult program as well. But just sitting in there and thinking like, okay, like these are people who are in similar stages of their career or lives, and seeing that like, okay, these are people just like me who I would never guess actually are going through what they're going through from the outside. I think that was a common thread between many of us as well. Of, you know, a big topic of conversation that we had when we were learning the skills is the concept of masking. So when you feel like you have to sort of put on a front for other people, so like, you know, everything's fine, I'm good, where like deep down you're like falling apart. That was a common challenge with myself and a lot of other people in the group that we learned, because I think again, like that people pleasing aspect, I've you know, I look back to even childhood anxiety that I had, and just, I don't know, just never feeling like I could actually express that, because I was always sort of focused on like how this looked to other people versus how is it actually impacting me. So I think those are like a lot of realizations I had of like, you just really never know what people around you are going through, because these are people who, you know, same life and career stages as me, who have maybe they finally hit their breaking point as well, where like therapy just wasn't enough anymore. But many of us bonded over just having people be so surprised, like especially at work, of like, I had no idea you were even going through any of that. Like, this is wild. And so we bonded about that a lot too, because it's not always obvious. So yeah, I think that community piece was huge, and just like, you know, it was kind of like, all right, girl, you're not unique. Like everyone has these thoughts. A lot of people do. Yeah, you're not special. Everyone has these thoughts. So in a way that was like very freeing too, to have that sense of community and common humanity piece of it. So
I'm just so proud of you too, because having known you now for a long time and having worked with you, like that whole, because you were always the one that's friendly, that's smiling, and I just assumed, everything is fine and good and happy, right? And then for you to go like truly like within and unpack that more. And I'm a culprit of people pleasing also. It's just, but for you to work on that, it's so. Backing up a little bit, I know you shared earlier more around sort of leading up to this decision. But can you help us discern a little bit more sort of whether this decision, like, was it, because sometimes you may go through these cycles, right? We all have our highs and our lows. Sometimes we just have a bad week or a bad month. And especially I think, well, growing up with a generation that was very much like, just get over it, it's gonna be fine, like you have so many good things happening for you, like why are you complaining? So help us understand sort of, how did you discern that it was not just like a bad week, that this was something more serious?
Yeah, no, it's such a good call out, because I think I grappled with this guilt piece, or minimizing what I was going through. Honestly, even once I decided to go to the program, it took me probably at least a month of leave to finally be like, no, you actually needed this, and you know, I don't need to feel guilty, because this is really something that I needed to do for myself. But I think, you know, a piece of it that really stuck out to me was just how it was building over time. So I think I started noticing like more intense feelings. I would say probably like October of last year, and I just couldn't really pinpoint like what it was.
So backing up a little bit, you shared a little bit, but just want to hear more around, because a lot of us go through these cycles of highs and lows, and it's just I'm just having a bad day or a bad week or a bad month. And especially like growing up in this generation that was very much like, just get over yourself, you have so much going for you, so much, we're so privileged, like just deal with it, it's gonna be fine. So how did you discern that it wasn't just a bad day or month, like this is something more serious?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's honestly something I struggled with a lot in terms of figuring out what I needed to do to take next steps. Because I think, I mean, like you said, thinking about all the things that I was grateful for, so privileged to, you know, have a stable job that I love. My family and friends are healthy. I have, you know, a roof over my head, all these things. I just felt so guilty of like, what, I just kept asking myself, like, what is wrong with you? Why can't you just hold on to those feelings of gratitude and like basically get over this. And so, I mean, of course, like bullying yourself into not feeling depressed and anxious doesn't really work. So I learned that the hard way. And so I think for me, just the compounding over time of these feelings and knowing that they weren't rational either, I think was really eye-opening for me and, you know, my family as well. Of, you know, I think where I really started to feel worse was probably October of 2022. But I couldn't put my finger on why that was. Like I was like, you know, there wasn't any like specific event that necessarily set it off. And I was like, you know, a month removed from my most recent egg retrieval that I did from IVF. And I think I sort of downplayed how much that actually probably impacted my mental and physical state. Just like the amount of, again, hormones that are flowing through your body, the regimen that you have to do all these injections and go to doctor's appointments, and then just mentally and emotionally of like, okay, is this going to be a good round? What are we going to get out of this? I think, you know, after like 8 cycles, which is, I hadn't done quite that many as of October, but it had been several rounds in a row. I think that, in addition to just some of these other kind of like bubbling mental health issues that I had for who knows how long, because again, I never realized that they were tied to actual mood disorders. But I think for me, losing like all interest and joy and really any activity, I think was a big sign for me. Like that didn't just last a day or a week or a month, like months on end of things that I typically would get a lot of enjoyment from. Again, the isolation piece of feeling like, okay, I think, you know, many people, myself included, need some time to themselves once in a while, but it just turned into like, I just didn't have the energy to really like, I would force myself into social situations thinking it'd be a good distraction or good for me. And then ultimately I would leave those just feeling so deflated because I felt like I was just in my own head the whole time. Like I was physically there, but not actually present. And so all of these things just kind of started snowballing one after another to the point where it was like, okay, everything on paper, I was like, I should be able to get through this, but I just continued to feel worse and worse and worse. And again, like the family and the doctor piece of like, you know, we recommend you do this, or, you know, my husband in particular, just, it was a really rough time where he didn't know how to help me. He was so supportive and did everything he could, but at the same time was just like, I don't know what else to do. Like, it just doesn't seem like you're getting any better. So I really feel for him in this scenario too. And in a way though, like having that third party or someone outside of you to say like, something is going on beyond just a typical stressor in your life. Like, you are not the same person right now as like the person I know you are. So I think like all of those kind of like compounding and worsening things is like, all right, this needs some serious attention. It's not just a bad day.
Yeah, I think I very much grew up in an environment where like mental health was not always really talked about, and there's a lot of stigma, and we'll talk a little bit more about stigma, but I want to get into like what you talked about. You had your husband, and even like you had family, you had your dad with you when you had initially went to the hospital. So it sounds like they were a part of this decision-making journey from the very start. But how did you navigate telling this to maybe the rest of your family? Or it sounds like you've obviously had a couple difficult conversations with your husband. Talk to us a little bit more about being able to break some of that stigma and like informing your loved ones that this is something that you're going through, or colleagues or friends, right? Even. Yeah. How did you do that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And to be honest, the podcast might be the first time some of my extended family or friends even hear about this, which is not to say, I finally have reached a point where I wanted to actually speak on this because I realized how many other people are likely going through similar like thought patterns as I was, or not really sure what this program meant. At the same time, after a while, like even though I'm pretty open about it now, it just gets kind of exhausting to kind of like broach the subject with every new person. So I've kind of tried to give myself grace with like, if it comes up and I feel like it's a good time to share, great, I'll share it. And other times I'm like, I just really don't want to talk about this. Like I'm at a party, or I haven't seen this friend in a while. I want to focus on them or things that are going on in their life. So I would say, honestly, I don't think any of my extended family even really knows what I went through. And then, I shared with some friends just based on people who'd shared their experiences with me, of just looking for some extra support. But honestly, and this is nothing personal, but like I have several friends who I just haven't broached the subject with, because again, sometimes it's just a lot of energy to break the ice with that. So I'm hoping speaking at a high level to this will make that easier. But with coworkers, like I will say legally, based on my situation, I was fortunate to be able to pursue medical leave and work for a company who I'm so fortunate has great insurance, helped me get into this program. But really, there's no legal obligation to share with your employer or your boss or your colleagues like what specifically you're going through. And talking to my HR business partner was really helpful too, because I felt at the time when I was asking for this time away and just saying like I don't know how long I'm gonna need, but like something's really wrong, I need to figure this out. It was just that reassurance of like, you have no obligation to even tell people any idea what's going on. Like everything's going to be through a third party provider. You can give them updates. They'll send updates to HR. I did end up, having a meeting with my team and sharing like, I need to take some time away to deal with some health issues, and everyone was super supportive, but I kept it really pretty vague from what I can remember. But then, as I came back to work a few months later, I really felt like, you know what, I know I'm not obligated to tell my team and my leaders who are so supportive of me, but I think it honestly would personally help me to just get this out there on paper. And so I ended up just kind of writing a long form email to like my direct team and leadership team who had helped with all the coverage while I was away. And even if no one read it, I just felt like it was sort of freeing just to get it out on paper and have people know exactly what I was doing. And the response from it was just incredible. Like everyone was so supportive, and even had several people reach out to me saying they had gone through various struggles as well, and do agree that it's still kind of a stigmatized subject at times. I think we're improving in terms of like mental health awareness, but there's still a lot of fear behind people speaking out about it. Or I know I was thinking like, how will people look at me differently having done this? But ultimately I think the learnings I had in the program, I just realized like, you know what, everyone goes through dark times in their life. I don't know that everyone has anxiety or depression, but at the same time, being able to just be a little more open about that, like it's not a weakness, right? It's like literally the brain chemistry that you have no control over just needs a little extra support and rewiring to kind of get back on track. So I think for me, that fear of like, what will people think of me, kind of just went away as I really reflected on the program, because I just realized how common it is. I'm not alone in this. And even if I were, it's like I would rather just have my team and my leaders know exactly what I was going through, so that there was just more of an understanding, I guess, of what I've been doing and how I'm feeling now, and just more transparency around the whole issue. So, yeah.
I think that vulnerability that you showed, though, that is one of the biggest strengths, right? And when you start to be vulnerable, that invites other people to resonate with that. So, and that's like incredible leadership on your part too, to get over the fear, right? And I'm glad that sounds like the majority of people were very supportive.
For sure.
So as you were navigating these conversations, though, did you ever feel that sense of judgment by people still, or did it change over time? How was that?
Yeah, I feel really fortunate that everyone that I've shared with so far, which again isn't like a huge group of people, I've sort of been doing the download on an like as needed basis. I think what I'll say in terms of the judgment piece is I still found myself judging my own situation a lot and kind of projecting that onto other people. So I found myself having to like caveat a lot of like, hey, this is what's like with friends, for example. I remember saying like, just so you know, I'm kind of like taking some time away from work, and I know that's kind of crazy because I like work for a great company, and this is going on and that's going on. So I sort of almost like put that judgment on other people because I still was so self-conscious of like, I don't deserve to take this time away. It's not that bad. I could have it so much worse. And just that comparison that honestly doesn't help anybody, was sort of always shining through my head. So it was interesting to actually see, again, fortunate to have very supportive people in my life who are like, no, I mean, don't think about it that way, or like you shouldn't feel guilty about this. So far I've had really positive reception, but again, smaller circles. So I know for other people, I'm thinking like, I know a lot of people have, like you're saying with the way we grew up, like families and different generations maybe aren't as used to talking about mental health. But for me so far, in terms of the conversations I've had, I've been extremely fortunate that people are open-minded and supportive about it. So
yeah.
Well, we're so honored for you to share your story and use our platform, because I think it's so important for so many people to hear this. And yeah, because we never know what people are going through. And there's still so much stigma associated with mental health and with outpatient programs. And I'm just learning so much from you today here. So what else do you think programs like the Compass in Chicago or whatever IOP people may be opting into can do to reduce the stigma? Outside of, I guess, us having conversations and just us being ambassadors even. What are other things you think should be done in that area?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly think that the more that people open up about their experiences, whether you are in therapy or go to a program like this or not, I think if we get more in a habit of being transparent with our circles, whether that's family, friends, or even coworkers. Like, again, I feel fortunate LinkedIn is accepting of like open and honest and transparent connections. And at the same time, I've been guilty of masking of like, oh yeah, how are you? Everything's good. Yeah. Let's like whatever, get done what we need to do. I think like truly, if we give ourselves and other people more opportunity to check in of like truly, how are you doing today? As basic as that sounds, I think will help just open up these conversations and make it a lot more natural. I will admit something that I would like to integrate into my life that I hadn't. I told myself I would after the program, but that I think people can start doing today or with their friends, family, teams at work, whatever it is we would start every day of outpatient with a mood check-in. So from 0 to 100, how are you feeling today? Like 0 being like the worst day ever, 100 being like euphoric, it's the best day I've ever had. And then really like picking some very specific emotions. And that was a big learning for me too, of like, I don't think I had a very good vocabulary or strong vocabulary, I should say, when it came to my emotions. It was like, oh, am I sad, mad, happy? And just even understanding there's a whole range of emotions that can describe how you're feeling. I would say I would encourage everyone to just reflect that for themselves, because whether you think about that for you or share that with other people, I think that can start to destigmatize some of this conversation too.
Love that.
And yeah, I would just say like, I know it's not easy to talk about, but what I found is as soon as I started to share my story, that it, more often than not, people relate to some part of what you're going through. So I would say, even if it's just like little small conversations here and there, I think the more open we are about it, the more we can remove some of the stigma from this conversation. So
Yeah.
Speaking of the emotions, I recently discovered the wheel. I don't know if you guys have seen those, but if people like Google that, it's definitely a thing, because there's a lot of like emotions within the major ones that we experience, and a lot of times we like choose one and people assume that you're fully sad when like there's actually a full spectrum within, say, sad and mad, right? Like there's a whole thing, and oftentimes we're not able to like fully articulate exactly it is, but it's a combination of a lot of these different emotions. So to your point, that's one of those things where I like recently learned about that I think is super effective when people are trying to articulate what they're experiencing.
for sure.
Brené Brown talks a lot about it too.
Yeah.
Atlas of the Heart. I don't know if you've seen it. But.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's been on my list for a while. I know exactly what you're talking about. And yes, the wheel of emotions and the fact that you can have multiple emotions that might even feel counterintuitive was a big learning for me too. Like sometimes like, well, I'm anxious but also feeling grateful. I feel a little depressed, but I'm also, feeling some joy from something that happened versus yesterday. And so that was kind of a common theme I learned too, is like your emotions are complex. So it doesn't have to just be I'm all happy emotions today or all sad emotions. It's much more nuanced than that. So I wish that was taught, in the education system. That's a whole other conversation and challenge. But I truly feel like everything I learned in this program should not just be for people going through a crisis. Like I think we'd probably minimize a lot of these issues, honestly, if we were all taught these coping skills as just a baseline. So
we want to obviously, this program is overall, I feel like it's so beneficial. Like whether you're going through this program or not, I feel like a lot of the skill sets and like the wheel and whatever it is, like all of these are so helpful for all of us. But I also want to talk a little bit more about like the downside and the difficulties of this program, because you mentioned you took time off, and we are lucky to have really good insurance. So can you talk to us about some potential difficulties, because we want to be as transparent as possible, right? Like not everybody could potentially participate in something like this. So what are things that people can consider or difficulties they may encounter if they choose to go with a program like this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great question, and I will just reiterate, I feel really fortunate and privileged that I was able to take this time away, have this leave, that I was able to, financially support myself and my family through this, while also having really great insurance. I think I'd already met my deductible for the year from all the other fertility stuff and various items. So ultimately, it was a really low out-of-pocket cost for me to do this program. However, I will say the Compass team, and I'm sure many other programs like this, were really helpful in terms of sharing exactly what the financial implications would be based on your insurance, or if you don't have insurance, what options are to fund it, as well as I think in terms of taking off work, there were several people in the program who for the nature of their job continued to work part-time, and then came to days that they could work out or shuffled around. So I think flexibility is crucial there in terms of figuring out something that works for you financially and from a time perspective. The program recommended really, like, if you can fully dedicate the entire kind of Monday through Friday full-time situation to the program, that is recommended, just so you can get fully immersed into that and not go back and forth sort of between therapy boot camp and work. So I feel so fortunate I was able to do that, because I don't think I would have had the capacity to focus on both, honestly. But I acknowledge that could be a challenge for people. So figuring out something that works for you and for your employer. My personal experience is, like, if you feel like you need something like this to get more professional support, honestly, nothing is more important than your brain and your health functioning. So as much guilt as I felt and still think back to how much I struggled to actually do this for myself, ultimately, even if you think about it from a pure like standpoint of what you'll be able to bring back to your job or to the business, like my executive functioning was so low. Like I guarantee you, I am doing way more now as a fully functioning human than I ever could have done had I got worse. So ultimately, it's a win-win for whoever, your company, your family, for you to get healthy, because ultimately there's just nothing that's more important, right, than our health. What do we have without our minds and our physical well-being? So
absolutely.
Yeah. Health is wealth is what I always tell people.
Yes.
It's true. And in the spirit of transparency, again, you mentioned like these different types of therapy are valuable for different people depending on what their actual needs are.
For sure.
Based on your experience, and we recognize this won't necessarily apply for everyone, but just in the spirit of transparency, what were parts that maybe were not as valuable, right? Because you mentioned a lot of components were so valuable for you and with so many takeaways. Were there parts, whether it's during the program or even maybe after the program, some of the support that you get after the program, were there parts where you maybe feel like were not as valuable for you?
Yeah, great question. So one thing that comes to mind was we would start every day with a mindfulness exercise. And so overall, I found it very beneficial, but it just reminded me of a consistent theme that the therapist would even tell us is just like, keep in mind, these are different meditations that we're giving you each week to kind of pick what works for you. Every single style isn't going to land with everyone. So just keep that in mind. And even if you find one out of the 12 weeks of different mindfulness activities that I did, like that's a win. So I think for me, like the physical meditations that we would do in terms of, rotating your arms and legs and like feeling the movement throughout your body, I didn't find that as valuable as I found like our thought diffusion exercises. So one was like, imagine leaves on a stream flowing down and place your thoughts. It doesn't matter if they're negative, positive, neutral, just put that thought on a leaf, watch it float away, and like do that without judgment. That I didn't think I would resonate, but I really found those visualizations of just like, I have all these thoughts coming through my head. If I just watch them instead of judging myself for having these, beneficial. So that's just one example of like, there's going to be a ton of skills that you would learn going through outpatient. Like really pick a couple things that are going to stick with you, because I have a full binder of amazing coping skills and different research and frameworks that we learn, but ultimately I lean on like 2 to 3 of those. So that's one thing I would say. And then for the program I did specifically, there was an option to do sort of like a bridge extended program virtually after you leave the live sessions. And for me, there were kind of 2 components. One was a weekly hour-long group therapy session, and then the other was continuing monthly sessions with your prescriber, so my psychiatrist in that case. And I had a great relationship with her, and so I signed up for the program basically because I wanted to keep working with her. I did not find the virtual sessions valuable for me personally, and I shared this with the program too, so things very much could have changed since then, but I was hoping sort of for that sit in the circle experience where we could process our emotions and challenges of what it's feeling like to get back into the real world, but ultimately it ended up being sort of more focused on refreshing different skills that we had learned in the program. So again, valuable for maybe some people, not so much for me, but take that with a grain of salt.
Yeah, super helpful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and Kat, you've shared so much goodness already. For people though that may be thinking about whether this is the right program for them or not, do you, in summary, just help them give some additional advice on like what are some of the things they could be looking at, researching? I know obviously a lot of the advice came from your therapist, it sounds like, but what other advice do you have for people that may be thinking about joining this program?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say if you're thinking that this might be valuable for you in some form or fashion. I know my experience was specific to my program in Chicago. If you're listening from somewhere else or even within Chicago, I highly encourage you to speak with your doctor, your therapist if you have one, get some recommendations based on the people or your care teams who know you the best, because again, there's different programs for different use cases. And so I think research on your own too. There's plenty of information available on various websites. For me, like honestly, location was a big factor for choosing the program I did, because again, in a state where I was struggling to even just like get myself moving in the morning or out of bed, I knew that driving to the suburbs from the city, for example, was going to be a big barrier for me. So think about some of the tactics behind it too. But ultimately, I'll just reiterate, like if you are thinking that whatever you're doing now is not helping you progress, or you're not feeling the way that as good as you could, just keep in mind, I truly believe that everything I learned in the program, had I learned it in, elementary school, kindergarten, like it would have significantly changed the way that I cope with the anxiety and depression. So if you're thinking that something like this might benefit you, I would encourage you to remember it's not just for the most extreme cases. And I wish I hadn't waited until I was at an absolute breaking point of nothing. There was no other option. I wish I would have done it earlier for myself, but at the same time, I needed that breaking point for me to say like, all right, this is the only option. So that would be my personal advice, just again, based on my experience, is like, do your research, talk to the people in your circles that you trust and who know you best. And then just remember, it's not this scary, extreme situation as you might see from the movies or TV.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Gosh, thank you so much for sharing. This is really the purpose, right? Is to be able to spread the word and be able to demystify. And that's really the goal of this episode, is for anybody who may be going through something similar, or they're struggling or considering, or maybe never heard of something like this, for them to, one, become aware that this is an option in case it ever is needed, but two, for folks who are thinking about it, hopefully this is that like added push, or that sort of like validation that you don't need to feel like you're crazy to go through something like this. Like a lot of people go through it, and it's very normal for people to go through a program like this. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. And Kat, I know you have a lot of exciting projects. So before we leave, share with our audience any projects that you're working on, or where we can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Sabrina and Jane, for hosting me today. It's been an honor. Hopefully this resonates with people maybe going through the same thing or something similar, or just kind of questioning what to do in terms of next steps for your mental health. So if this resonated with you, or you have questions or just want to get in touch, feel free to reach out to me on either LinkedIn, so linkedin.com/Kat Morse-Waiora. We'll tag that so you know the spelling, and then or on Instagram too, if you want to just send me a direct message at Kat Morse-Waiora is my handle. So thank you for that. And then in terms of projects, so just pretty recently started my role as a solutions engineering leader at LinkedIn. And so a few months in, just trying to learn as much as I can about the new products and the side of the business. So loving that. And then this whole experience really had me think about what I'm really passionate about, and what I kind of want to spend the next few years doing. So have finally tapped into my entrepreneurial interests and working on a beverage business and getting that off the ground as sort of a side hobby here. So I'll keep you all posted as that gets underway, but working on some formulations and research at the moment.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much again for joining us, and we'll make sure to share your beverage company whenever that's ready.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And of course, we want to hear from our audience as well, as always. What is your experience with mental health and therapy? Have you or someone you loved explored or participated in an outpatient program? How did you support each other? We would love to hear from you. Please email us at whereisthelинepod@gmail.com. And of course, as a reminder, you can subscribe wherever you're listening to us. We are on Apple, Spotify, and Google Podcast. Until then, have a good one. Bye.
Thanks so much.